Thank you, Andreas. Thank you for a question, actually. I can start with that. Because the IFRS Sustainability Standards require that the risks and opportunities on sustainability are seen over time horizons, short, mid, and long term, and consistently are requiring that the anticipated and current effects on the financial statements and the financial situation of the company are being reported. There are a number of transition reliefs and reliefs, structural reliefs about it, but that's what it does. And so in effect, whether a particular provision should be made in a P&L, whether an intangible should be reconsidered or a fixed asset should be provided against issues and risks that may be coming in the future is absolutely part of applying S1 and S2 properly. And so, in no way, I think, we should look at IFRS S1, S2, at the ISSB standards as ESG. They are not. They are an accounting language. And they will only work if all of this room and many others are actually using it that way. The consistency of the assumptions in the sustainability reporting with the assumptions in accounting, and the overlaps, as I just described in the case of the current effects, but also the projections beyond. Because it's very true that at the reporting date something stops, but that reporting date is already full of forward-looking information. All the intangibles, all the goodwills, all the terminal value of acquisitions that are like decades away are already in the intangibles. So that connection between the two is where I think only the IFRS Foundation had a solution to propose, and why there was such a wide consensus to start with that 3 years ago it should develop the ISSB standards. And I'm saying all of this because back to also what Andreas started to in his speech about this very volatile, unpredictable world in which we live. If there is one tool that accountants and that investors need to navigate their understanding in investors' decisions, in financing decisions for banks, for insurance, about a company, that is S1 and S2. Because we are, again, not an ESG tool. We are a tool that maps in all the space of value chains, in all the time horizons, the fundamental risks and opportunities that can affect a business prospect. And geopolitics are part of that. And so with that, what I could say is we started, as you all know, a few years ago, and on the 12th of June this year, there was a big moment for us, the moment of publishing what we had committed to a year ago, which is the profiles of the adoption of all the jurisdictions around the world that have decided to adopt or otherwise use the ISSB standards. And while Sue and I and all the technical team, regulatory team, reviewed one by one the 33 profiles and snapshots that we published after bilateral conversations with all of those jurisdictions on the 12th of June, I think for me it made it real. We've been speaking about this momentum, about the pace of adoption, but suddenly we had the evidence, deep factual evidence of the level of adoption. It basically means that 30 plus jurisdictions that cover more than half of the global economy, more than half of the greenhouse gas emissions, more than half of the global populations, have decided that the ISSB standards would be between them, among them, a common good, a common language to ensure that their capital markets, their financing needs would meet the needs of their economies to transform into a more resilient model, to be able to weather the storms that are coming all over the place and that will probably increasingly coming to their macroeconomics situation. And for that, I would like to just start by saying 3 thank you. One is because these standards are your standards. We did not, write them in our little ivory tower. We consulted extensively. You contributed in this room and way beyond all of that to these standards. And so a big thank you for your contribution to these standards. The second thank you is for your trust. The trust those jurisdictions and they are not alone, that those jurisdictions placed in these standards to be appropriate, fit for purpose, as IOSCO said, for their needs to regulate capital markets and go for mandatory application of those standards in their jurisdictions and capital markets. And they were not alone, because investors were consulted, because companies were consulted, because the assurance profession was, and many other experts, to bring that trust to the life that we recognize with those profiles. And the third is for the leadership of those jurisdictions that started first. The members of our jurisdictional working group, for instance, of course, but also the first jurisdiction that mandated the standards, like Turkey, for instance, like Nigeria, that announced already in 2022 that they would use the standards. That Brazil, where we saw the first couple of very insightful reports coming from Brazil, where the standards will be mandated next year already, and many others. So thank you for your leadership all, because that would lead me now to 3 observations for the next steps. The first is, when we started, there was a big risk. There are 2 big risks. The first was the fragmentation. Andreas spoke again about it. Could we deal about fragmentation? Yes, it's not easy, but we decided we could. And we couldn't have done that without you. But that fragmentation was going to be the fact that the myriad of ESG metrics and disclosures that were voluntary, that were private, was going to be a myriad of mandatory language across the globe, where there would have been no investor comparability for the data and multiple, double, triple, multiple times reporting for companies. Just the end of any common language. That would be mandatory. We saw that risk coming very, very soon, even before we started, and that's the reason why ISSB was created. I can tell you, and I will be assertive today with you, you succeeded in avoiding that fragmentation. The momentum is such, with that group of 30 plus, with the Global Emerging Market Committee of IOSCO having created an adoption network, which is populated with another 15 jurisdictions on top of the first 35, including hugely important jurisdictions such as South Africa, Saudi Arabia, India, that are members of that adoption network and that are considering the opportunity of using the baseline. So those together are protecting that fragmentation. There is now a cost, a huge cost, for developing your own standard on your own without first considering the use of the baseline. And there is also a cost, not insignificant, of not joining the baseline. When you think about the fact that those jurisdictions that have committed to, and some already applying, the ISSB standards, they represent 50% of China's trade. They represent 50% of European trade. They represent 80% of US trade. And when you speak with governments, with regulators, they speak about foreign direct investments, about capital market availability, they speak about stability of the capital markets, they speak about their debt rating, sovereignty debt rating, they speak about trade. So I dare to say you have fixed together the fragmentation problem. The second risk that we have, and that's my second observation, was greenwashing. It was not a risk, it was a fact. Many companies were spending a lot of money in trying to say something. No investor would believe in it because it was not comparable, not reliable, not assurable, not the same. And so, have we overcome that risk? The answer is no. The fragmentation risk was overcome by the speed of horizontal growth of the standards, from 0 jurisdiction to 35, soon 50, and the organic growth will continue, horizontal growth. Today, the risk of greenwashing continues to exist. It will continue as long as there is no proper application and decision-useful reports of ISSB standards that are delivered in all of those jurisdictions and beyond with voluntary application of the standards, as you know is permitted already in many cases. And that is a risk that we face together, and we will not face it only then together. And so that leads me to the third observation and final observation. We have a shared responsibility. Our responsibility to ensure that we deal with that risk is to support you, as we have started to do. From standard setting, we have also now become an engagement platform, a capacity building platform, an educational material delivery platform, where we partnered with many implementation partners in capacity building to offer proper education, proper material, proper engagement with all the market participants and the ecosystems locally in the jurisdictions. There is so much that we can do. We can't do much more than this, but we hope that it can then be a catalyst for each of the jurisdictions to take this and run with that. The sooner you do your capacity building, the sooner you learn, the sooner there will be good applications and therefore decision-useful reports that will protect from greenwashing and continue to fight against the fragmentation risk. The second thing we do for you is continue to do good technical work, focused on the implementation of S1 and S2. And I'm very pleased that last week in Beijing, we voted the launch of an exposure draft on the ISSB standards, because we've been told all over the world that industry-based disclosures are the most cost-effective and decision-useful disclosures for sustainability risks and opportunities. And there is a forceful ED that's coming with 120 plus an extra 30 days for consultation. And I really, on behalf of all the team here of ISSB and the foundation, encourage you to take active part in that consultation. And the last thing we do for you is continue to work on interoperability, defragmentation, consolidation of the space. And as you know, we've launched today a commitment that we made exactly a year ago, last week of June 24, when we assumed the legacy of the Transition Plan Task Force of the UK TPT, on their disclosure framework, with the issuance of the TP disclosure guidelines of ISSB today. This is a voluntary initiative. It can be used by companies, by the financial institutions, by the bank supervisions all over the world, but that's our concrete contribution to a continued defragmentation and consolidation of the space. On that topic, stay tuned for this week. There will be another very interesting, I think, announcement in terms of consolidation and simplification by the end of this week that have us part of this. That is our part of the shared responsibility, and I will finish with yours, my friends, because you obviously have a huge responsibility now, which is the vertical growth. Each of you where you are, ensuring that more companies apply the standards in a way that is made to be cost effective on one side and decision useful. That vertical growth is critical to ensure that from today, the continued greenwashing, we come to gradually a situation where that language is used for appropriate decision making, and therefore ultimately the resilience of both capital markets and economies to all the changes that we see coming, and for which we need tools to assess them properly and to replicate them into an accounting language that can then serve the proper market allocation, pricing signals that will allow that transition. I will just conclude and finish by saying that I don't think that there is anything forever in this world. Languages, they're born and they die. We've seen them over the last, 10,000 years and probably more, but even more recently. So that language will only be living and thriving as long as this community is actually using it, and using it to make decisions. The more decisions we will make with that language, the more we will speak it fluently and the more lively it will be. If you don't use it, it will die. There is nothing that we will be able to do against that. So it's an absolutely shared responsibility. I feel privileged with my colleagues on the ISSB that for the last 3 years, it's been an incredible momentum and support, the trust and the leadership of everyone. But now it's truly a very, very shared responsibility where a good deal of all of that will only be supported by us. But now this is your turn in using that language. So make sure that we will always be here to ensure that that language continues to be lively, but please use it as much as you can, as much as you want. Thank you so much for your trust and confidence.